Welcome to the Cutting Edge, where we're going to take a walk in the park today. If trees are cut down and made into pages and pages are put into books, then when we're reading, we're like taking a stroll through the park, right?
I like that.
That works, yeah. And we have our church's librarian, college librarian, AJ Woodsum. Hey, AJ.
Thanks for having me on. It's always fun to talk about books.
I know it's a passion of yours. I also know a side passion of yours is helping others. You're a firefighter / paramedic, right?
Yeah, so I've been with Los Angeles County Fire Department for about 12 years now. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And that's taken you quite a few different places with the special team you're on, right?
Yeah, so I'm part of the USAR program, and I'm at one of our USAR stations currently. And then I've been part of our task force, which has led me to Turkey a couple years back after the earthquake.
Yeah, and you did a lot of disaster relief aid. You were actually in the buildings helping people, pulling them out, right?
Yeah, so in that case, we are, our specialty is going into collapsed structures, searching for any victims, and then removing them from, the building itself, so.
All while keeping them intact, don't want to lose any pieces.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to keep us safe and try and remove them safely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, as you are saving people, you also are a very well-educated man, especially when it comes to your library and to the college ministries library. You have a ton of experience when it comes to this. Just hands-on, you've dived into a lot of literature. I'm going to assume a variety of literature.
Yeah.
So you're well-versed in this topic, no pun intended.
Yeah, not as much as I want to. I always feel like there's more to be read. But it has been, thankfully, because of just wise counsel and people in my life, it's been, my education has continued on long after college.
That's always good because wisdom gives the advantage of success. Yes. Okay, so tell us, how did you discover your love for good books and reading?
My parents, a big part. In our house was a lot of books. Both my parents are readers. Very different types of readers, though. But almost every room had books in it. They didn't necessarily read a lot, but it was always kind of present. But it wasn't, I was probably around 9 or 10. And I remember my mom she wanted a good series for a young boy. And there wasn't, at the time, not a lot of like new books for young boys at the time. That was not like Goosebumps or something like that. And then she found one, and I read this whole series. It's called the Spirit Flyer series. It's about a boy who finds a magical bike that can fly. It's by this Christian author, John Bybee. And I just fell in love in this fantastical world that he created. I couldn't read enough of that. And then that very much launched me into like my middle school, high school time I read everything I could get my hands on. I didn't necessarily go out and buy books. It was what was available in the house. So I read a lot of what my mom read and a lot of what my dad read. So Frank Peretti, back in the day, the Left Behind series. Yeah. There I am, like 14, reading the Left Behind series.
Oh, wow.
And so that was a big part of my, like I said, middle school and high school time. I went to college. Probably the first year I kind of got swept away in the busyness of college. Reading took a back seat. But it wasn't until my sophomore year I went to IBEX, the Israel Bible Extension campus, for a master's. And I had a professor there, Randy Cook, who would read 80 books in a year, and he would talk about his reading, and it would often come up. You could tell he's well informed, and it was just a part of who he was. And a group of us asked, "Hey, what could you sit down with us? Like, how do you do that? We're curious. What is your reading life like?" And he did. I still have he had a printout. It's one of the most impactful things in my reading life, and it was titled "Hooked on Books" with Randy Cook, and he went through all the different practical aspects of reading, and that really reignited my love for reading. Once I got home, I couldn't visit enough used bookstores. One of the first ones I went to was one called Archives in Pasadena. This beautiful old bookstore, used bookstore, and I found a copy of a book that I'd heard about and had come across. Probably not the best starter if you're looking to get into books, but it's Dante's Divine Comedy, and that had captured my imagination. And I think that really introduced me to the joy of literature in that it's all intertwined, and good literature always reflects other literature. And there's always this. So, for example, in the Divine Comedy, there's a fictitious character called Virgil, and he's based off the real Roman poet Virgil. So I'm reading this book, and I was like, oh, Virgil. And in the book, it's like the greatest poet ever. And I was like, okay, so I'll read Virgil. And Virgil wrote a book called the Aeneid. And again, he was Roman, so this is 2,000 years old. And then I discovered the Aeneid is based off of Homer's work. And so like what Homer did for the Greeks, Virgil wanted to do for the Romans, giving this epic story of their origin. And so he ties it into Homer. And so I thought, well, I want to read Homer now. And then as you're reading and kind of diving in, there would be these great discoveries. And be like, I get the reference. This is so cool. Like, oh, this is this. And you see it for yourself. And there's this depth that opens up and you see it. And it's not always the easiest reading in terms of going through epic poems. But there was such reward. And it really, there's been no looking back since.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot to say there, especially with Randy Cook. I'm glad he became a teacher and not an accountant, because he would have to cook the books. But
yeah, that talk would have been much different.
recently, I did a kind of like a bit of a study on the summary of Paradiso, and it was very interesting because you not only could you see the influence of the culture at the time, but you could also see the influence of their science. And how the whole solar system was structured. You could really peer into their view at the time. It was very mechanical, and it was very spherical, almost like a gyroscope. A gyroscope, which was interesting to me because you could see how they were able to view the world at that time and what was the prevailing philosophy. And that just is impactful because you just get to see throughout the ages how different people have viewed God's word and how they've interpreted it, and what's like you said, the worldview of it.
Yeah.
And that's shaping because you can just see how it's kind of progressed throughout the time.
Yeah, I think it's Lewis uses this analogy of reading old books is like opening up a window and letting in the fresh air. The idea that we can be in our own little modern cocoon and just hear our own voices, but it's when you look that far back, you're opening and letting in this fresh air in of how we ought to be thinking. And yeah, certainly Dante is one of the greats for sure.
Oh yeah. You've spoken very passionately about this. Why should a Christian set aside time for reading? There's so many forms of entertainment. There's movies, there's reels, there's fellowship, there's going out and playing sports. What makes reading in your mind and from your experience so much more impactful than maybe those other forms of entertainment? Or
yeah, I think first I frame it in, it's not like about one thing. So I'm not against movies. I love movies. I love entertainment as a whole is not like, oh, it should all be down. Like it's low, has no value. And then of them, like I only pick one. So I do watch movies. I do all sorts of things that are not reading books. But I would argue that books are, there's so many advantages. So it's like the steak of the course. There is candy, there is mac and cheese, there is all these ways that you can enjoy the arts. But if it's story you want, then there are few things better than a novel. There's few things that can go deeper. There's few things that allow you to go into another experience or worldview or perspective than a book. And I think it's also in our modern times of everything has become so short and we're more and more unable to slow down and think slowly and to meditate or to focus long term. Reading's almost like the perfect antidote for our modern just click culture of just, I want 15 seconds and I'm moving on. Not to say that that is in and of itself terrible, but that is, again, I kind of like, that's candy. You should have a little bit of candy, but your diet shouldn't be on candy. And so for the Christian, it's reading, and in this case, I'm talking literature and even like nonfiction. There's just so many benefits, and there's both like actual physical health benefits to it, but I would just say, as a Christian, we are to be in the world, but not of the world. We are not to be completely ignorant of the things going on. And I think we are also called to have a compassion, and we're called to, like Paul says, to be all things to all men. Reading gives you the ability to see other things and other perspectives. I really feel like travel and reading can help you overcome your own blindness to how you think. And reading, like you mentioned, of just going back, when you read Paradiso, you're going back in time and you're seeing the world how they saw it. And that reading always does that. A good book will always take you back, and then you get to experience and understand that person a little bit better. And as Christians, we should be first and foremost willing to do that, right? We want to understand those around us. We want to understand so we can be better at sharing the gospel. We can be more compassionate, right? All these things are always premised on a relationship. And in a sense, you can start building a relationship with people by reading.
So if we're reading broadly, we're then able to we would say sympathize and have a better understanding with the world around us. We could literally take our Christian worldview as a grid and then channel what we're reading through that view and see what pops out. Like maybe there's an emphasis currently in our society on justice, and that's just coming out through the current works. Is that what we're looking at? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it can either be a topic or, so let's take justice, where you have a sense of, hey, there's injustice going on in society, this or that, like, or you might be aware, and there's been times like this where I don't sense injustice, where, hey, things are fine for me, I'm good. But it's in reading that you realize, wow, this can be going on. So an example, there's a book called The Accusation by a man, he goes under a pseudonym of Bandy. It's a collection of short stories on what life is really like in North Korea. He still lives there. The book was snuck out a little while ago, and then it was translated in like 2017 into English. And reading that book, I mean, we don't think about North Korea. We don't think much of what it's like to live there. But reading that book, you get a sense of the actual consequences of an evil dictator. And I'm not just saying like a bad guy, I'm talking evil, where someone wants to crush your soul. And there's in a sense, from reading that book, and even though I've never met someone from North Korea, there's a connection and a sympathy and a compassion that's built there. And so for Christians, it might be a topic, like we said, justice, but it might be an area. Like for maybe someone who's preparing to be a missionary, like, have you not just read about that country, but have you read that country? And books, when we're talking about why we should read and why it's prioritized, why it should be prioritized for Christians, books in one sense is how we as adults educate ourselves. And education is not just knowing facts about a thing. You can know like, oh, in North Korea, the dictator is this, and that was established then, and there's this many deaths. But that's only one part of it. Joseph Epstein, in his book called Novel, Why We Should Read It, or Why You Read It, he talks about how there's a sense of, and a novel can allow you to learn about a thing that's different than just the knowledge of it. And so there's just certain things you can't learn. It's almost like you get to experience a thing through a novel than just know about a thing. There's a quote, and I forget who said it. It's irony that the best book on the French Revolution is by an Englishman, and that would be A Tale of Two Cities by Dickens. And it really is like, you want to understand the French Revolution, read A Tale of Two Cities. And you'll understand it in a way that you'll never understand it just by reading. Read the histories, read all that. But bringing this back to why should Christians read novels is to educate yourself. And educate yourself either on a topic, a people group, or just in general. But you really will be growing in a more well-rounded way than if you just, certainly if you're not reading at all.
It sounds like you're going to get that secondhand experience. You're going to kind of catch that downdrift, I think is what they call it. So, yeah, that's a good book. Accusations by Bandy?
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's soul-crushing, though. It really is, like, it's one of the saddest things I've ever read.
Okay. So just be ready when you read it.
Yeah. And it's a good example of, it's fiction, but it's accurate. And I think that's some of the people's kind of like, well, I don't want to read fiction, it's not real. But fiction is real. A good novel is real. It does portray life how it really is. And though the events and characters is made up, it's still created by humans. And it does reflect. And it's interesting because you read that book and you're like, oh, these specific events may not have happened like this, but this is what life is like in North Korea. And that's one specific case. But that's any good book is, this is how humans really are. And you can learn a lot from that. Another example is like The Great Divorce, right? Is there a more accurate depiction of human beings in this fictitious, fantastical world, right?
Yeah.
When they're struggling and you see these different people, both in yourself and in others, and you're like, wow, that really is how I respond. That really is me, right? But it's fiction, and yet there's sometimes it's never more true.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the guy in the very beginning who keeps talking about his rights and what he's entitled to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can almost put a face on it, and sometimes it's your own face and sometimes it's someone else. You're like, wow, or you're convicted, right?
Yeah.
The times I was convicted reading that book, or even Screw Tape Letters, or Pilgrim's Progress, right? Where you're like, wow, that is me. That is my sin, or that is my life, in a sense.
Yeah. So good. How should Christians approach reading? Should they do it broadly? Should they maybe go for a topic and go deep on it? Slowly working through large works? Maybe reading, going like on a marathon, reading a bunch of small ones? What's your recommendation? What's your strategy on it? There's different ways to approach reading. What have you seen that's the best?
The quick answer is yes, all of that.
Yes.
There should be times of broad, there should be times of going really deep in a topic. There should be, you read really fast, and then you should read really slow. Part of it is what you're reading will dictate that. If you're reading the Puritans, you're reading Tolstoy, you're gonna read really slow, and you're gonna enjoy that. Maybe not initially, but that's part of it, because the work you're reading might be it's deep, and so take the time to dig in and just enjoy the slow pace of that. Other books, if you're reading like a thriller, right, or Agatha Christie, then by all means just tear. They call them page turners for a reason, and they're meant to be read quickly, right? There's not a depth that you necessarily need to go. Kind of two things. For someone who is not, like if they're listening to this and they're like, I want to get into reading, I would say start really small and really fun. Whatever is your interest, try that. And just have a goal of reading. I'm reading 2 pages a day, maybe 1 page a day. Just try and shoot for the most obtainable, easy thing. And if it doesn't interest you, put the book aside. And I'll say this, I'm going to give you permission to quit on any book you want.
Whoa.
We're not in school anymore. These are not assignments. You're not doing them for anything else than your education. And so if a book, and usually the case is the book is bad, and just don't finish a bad book. It's not well written, it's immoral, like just put it down. Other times books are just not hitting you where you're at in life, and you may come back to it. There's been books where it's like, this is just not striking my fancy, and that's okay. But we'll just put it down. Don't waste time. There's too much precious time. So don't waste it. Don't think of it as formal education of, I have a set of reading lists and I need to summarize it and take out the main points. That's not what we're going for at all. So if you're starting, then start small, start fun, read the most, whatever piques your interest. Some people that's biographies or history, like that's a great way to get into it. Other people just pick up, whatever interests you and then keeps you going. But start small. Don't pick up like War and Peace and be like, yeah, I'm gonna read this and I'm gonna read it in 3 days. You're not. I'm gonna like Moby Dick. Like that's not where you should start. Now, in terms of, I think and this is something Randy Cook taught me. This is other people, my friends. This is kind of my method is you should be reading a lot of different things at the same time. I break it down into like categories. And so, I mean, this goes without saying, but we'll say it like scripture. Scripture's every day. That's constant intake, right? So we're almost like, because that's a given, right? And then I'm usually working through some type of devotional or spiritual book. And that could be like theology or Christian living or something like that. Typically, that's what I read in the morning after my Bible. And so there's that so I have one of those books going. And then for some people, it might be vocational, like you should be reading up on either because you're into it or you're getting into this certain career or you're just trying to keep up on your skills. There should be some level, so that kind of takes priority. So maybe you're reading journals, essays, or whatever it might be for your vocation.
Like a sales book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then for me, I usually have a nonfiction and a fiction going at the same time. I don't ever double up within a category. I do think that'd be kind of hard to keep track of. It's not impossible, but I do think it's helpful to have different books going on that are different categories. And so if one's really dry, I'm reading more over here. And then it's like, well, I just do a couple pages in this one and kind of work my way through it. It's a little deeper, it's a little heavier. And then I kind of go over here and like, oh, this is the page turner, this is the fun thing. But by doing that, I'm working through a whole range of things. And so I kind of keep a broad topic. And then I think if very practical ways about, strategies is you have set times, or you have set areas, and you remove distractions. Know generally when you're going to read, hey, before I go to sleep, I'm reading this. But don't read the same thing you're going to read to sleep in the morning, right? Like they're different times. Maybe you have a book in the bathroom, short chapters, right?
Short stories,
yeah, short stories, or things like that. And so have kind of like, these are my area, this is when I read, this is where I read, and then my standard of I set my phone away, I turn it on silent, I turn off the distractions, and I just focus on this and let myself meditate on this.
That's good. So we can see our reading then as a palette, and it starts off small and it's simple, and that's okay, but it will expand over time with our reading. Like a taste expands over time, and you can pick up certain accents and spices, so our reading will. And we should be okay with that. That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also what you would say is for the books that require, I wouldn't say the work, but they require the time, you should set aside the time. And you shouldn't try to burn through them just so you get the gist. You should allow yourself to be immersed in it.
So Tony Reinke, again, in his book Lit, talks about if you just read 1 hour a day, what that would do for you. So I have a quote from him that says, the average reader can read about 250 words a minute. That's 105,000 words a week. This book, Lit, is around 55,000 words, meaning with 1 hour of reading a day, you could be reading more than one book a week and close to 70 books a year. I'm also an average reader. This is not... out there, you're an average reader, and with just the average reading ability, it's not like there's this super skill. The skill of reading or the ability to read 70 books is not you're a really fast reader or you're super intellectual. It's a matter of time. And that is always the hardest thing about reading, is making the time. And if it is a priority, we are going to make the time. No one's going to give you the time to do it. Lewis gave this lecture during World War II. He's a professor. He has these young students who are the same age as those are on the front line, and he gives a lecture called Learning in Wartime. And in it, he sums up towards the end of it, he says, the only people who achieve much are those who want knowledge so badly that they seek it while the conditions are still unfavorable. Favorable conditions never come. There is no good time to read. There is no good time to educate yourself. There is no good time. But that shouldn't stop us. We will make the time and we will fight for this if it's worth it. And if anything, I hope your learning is that it's worth it.
Yeah. Carpe diem.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. And that's just so impactful that he said that during World War II. I'm sure he was saying that during the bombing raids that was going on. I remember reading, funny enough, I remember reading about that. And just how the British people were holding on so tightly to Churchill and Lewis and some of the other broadcasting, and that was what kept them going. Yeah. So for him to say that just really adds another oomph to the importance of reading.
And I mean, if you feel like your conditions are more unfavorable than a man in London during World War II, then by all means, I guess you don't have to read.
Some people may have opinions about this, and I wanted to know what your take was. Certain Christians would not want to read secular works. They would want to read science fiction. Maybe they would dive into history, but they would all be very hesitant to do so. What would you say to that opinion? And then if you were against that opinion, how would you challenge that person?
Yeah, it is a great question. I think it's one Christians should wrestle with. I would say we've drawn the wrong line on secular and sacred. The idea that here's Christian works and here's secular works. The line has gone too far one way, in that we're called to be discerning. The only thing that doesn't require discerning, the only thing that a Christian can truly rest on is Scripture, right? That is the inerrant Word of God, and everything said in there is true, and you can just rest on that. I often think of just the craziness of the world and what is true, and I can always go back to Scripture. Everything outside of Scripture requires discernment. So when we talk about like, well, if it's secular, should I read it? We should be saying, should I read it on everything? I think of the book The Shack, right? Very popular, 15 years ago?
Oh, yeah.
That was a Christian book sold in Christian bookstores. And it is about the most heretical book you could find on the Trinity. I didn't read it myself, but not only was I told it's not a very good book in general, but it's heretical.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, it's labeled Christian, right? And isn't that convenient when things are labeled? Well, life is not convenient like that. We don't get this is full of heresy, you should not read it. But often we ascribe it says Christian on it. It's Christian art. And then, so my one is discernment applies to all things outside of Scripture. Any preacher or any author, anybody we're listening to, every movie we're watching, may it be a Christian movie or not, it requires discernment. It's all mixed together. It's not labeled like this is all good and this is all bad. Life is not so simple. Thus, discernment. Thus, when Hebrews talks about it, he's talking about how that's for mature Christians, discernment. It's really hard. Yeah. I wish everything was easily labeled. I wish there was you could just say all science fiction is bad. But we're not given that opportunity. We must always be blind, no matter who the author is. If it's outside those 66 books in Scripture, we're to have a level of suspicion about it. And so that's kind of like step one for me. That's where discernment comes in. Two is I don't see art in any way as Christian or secular. Other than the classic sense of that's the subject, right? So it's sacred because it's an image of, like, it's a painting of Paul, right? The apostle. But in terms of like this art is Christian, that's like saying this truth is Christian. Well, it's truth. We're being redundant here. We don't need to be. Remember, it's God who gave us art. In the temple or in the tabernacle, right? It's God, and this is from Schaeffer's book, Art in the Bible. Phenomenal little pamphlet. It's great on this topic. And he points out several things that because God gave the plans for the tabernacle. And in them are pillars that don't support anything and pomegranates on vines. These are both not accurate to nature because pomegranates grow on trees and not vines, and not architecturally important, pillars that don't support anything. What is the point? God is creating art. Art in and of itself has value, and this is something God has given us, is the arts. The other aspect of it is, Tolkien points this out, that we are sub-creators, is what he calls it. That God is the creator, and God can create out of nothing. But part of the ways we are image bearers of God is that we also create, not out of nothing, out of the materials he's given us, but we do get to create. And that reflects God's glory. The arts reflect God's glory as a whole. Now the question always is, as the artist, are they doing that? But not, well, because they labeled it Christian, they're doing that. Because it could just be bad art as well. I think at work we kind of have a joke of safety is not the first rule. Does it work is the first rule, right? Because if the thing isn't going to work, then don't bother with if it's safe or not. And I almost want to say the first question we should ask is the art good? Because good art reflects and glorifies God. It is beautiful. It has skill. It tells a story, right? These are things that make art good. Is it good art? And then we kind of shift to, well, then you could say, is it safe, right? Then discernment and convictions come in that sense. But if it's not good, we don't even need to bother with it. And so those are kind of how I approach it. Everything requires discernment. Good art glorifies God. And we aren't, we're not though we seek after truth, though we as Christians want truth, we're not the only ones who hold truth. A heathen could say a thing true. And there's a great quote, I'm going to read it from John Calvin. He says, all truth is from God, and consequently, if a wicked man have said anything that is true and just, we ought not to reject it, for it has come from God. Besides, all things are of God, and therefore, why should it not be lawful to dedicate to his glory everything that can properly be employed for such purpose? Again, we can't just label things. Hey, this guy is a heathen, so everything he says is bad. Life's not that simple. Individual things must be applied to discernment and sought after. Is there God's truth? Now, with that being said, in terms of, okay, we've looked at art, there is a level of convictions. There is a level of we're not satisfying the flesh. We're not making allowances for the flesh, right? We're not using our Christian liberties as excuses to sin. One of my personal kind of when does something become inappropriate for me to read or watch or even what the art that is I'm not going to engage in? And one of them is it describing sin or glorifying sin? Remember, the Bible, even in its narratives, describes sin. We want actually authors to describe sin. We want evil to be portrayed as it really is, evil. You want the guy to be, right, the bad guy. You want the bad guy to actually be bad. That is a good thing. That's not something we should shy away with, there's people doing bad things in this book or in this movie. But the question is are they being glorified or are they being punished at the end? Does it reflect God's truth in that in the end justice does win and the wisdom is personified? Or is it something that glorifies sin, where it is the purpose of it is almost like you ought to be this way, right? Look at how cool or how exciting of a life this person is leading in their sin. So I think that's more of a question of what is there, because there is plenty of non-believers making art that are accurately portraying evil and in a way that is engaging and we should engage with. And so for me, that's kind of the line of and then there's certain levels of convictions too. If you're like, hey, in terms of violence or maybe language or maybe this or that, kind of where you're at, I would, we never want to push a brother past, or, a stumbling block. But
yeah, their conscience.
We shouldn't be afraid of a portrayal of sin. If anything, that's good to see sin for what it is.
So listen to your conscience. Don't go beyond what your conscience allows, but at the same time, you can admire the art for what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So everyone who's listening to this and are watching this is definitely captivated at this point, and they are wanting to know, what books are you currently working through, and what would you recommend?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I work through a couple different books concurrently. So here's some of the ones. My morning read is The Bruised Reed by Richard Sibbes, is a Puritan paperback. I don't read these often. They're rather intimidating, even though they're just little books. And this is one I'm reading 3-5 pages at a time. That's kind of all I can. It requires a lot of concentration, and though he's more accessible than we often associate with the Puritans, it's not the easiest read either. And sometimes it just be the depth and truth he's pointing out, or just his language. So that's one I'm enjoying very much and learning a lot, and that's one that I'm slowly. And in my mind, I have no time frame for that. It's just I'm gonna finish it when I finish it. I don't really concern myself with I got to get through this quickly, or I'm not going through it very fast. It's just kind of the pace of the book is dictating it. I'm reading the novel Who Needs It by Joseph Epstein. He is a fantastic author. He mostly does essays, and this book is on the importance of the novel, and it's really good. Really, I love his writing style as a whole. If you ever can get a collection of his essays, they're just next level. He's probably one of the best essayists of our age, and so a lot of people speak highly of him. A friend recommended it to him, and whenever I come across him, I start reading what he's reading. Megan and I are reading a book together. I read it out loud to her, and this was just kind of a gift that I had for her, and so it's called In Kill Temper by a husband and wife. And they are both full-time authors who live in kind of the country, Irish countryside. Mm-hmm. And it's about their gardening life.
Huh.
They moved to this property in Ireland specifically to partake in the rural life. And the garden is very much a part of who they are. It's one of those books that the writing is good enough that it just kind of draws you in.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a fun book to read together.
Definitely. I think that's pretty poppin' too. A lot of people like the homestead idea.
Yeah.
Starting their own
Yeah.
farm. Yeah.
And so here's this authors who are kind of reflecting on what it means, what this life means, and kind of looking back over 30 years and being reflective of it. And it's just an enjoyable read. And again, that's one we read a couple pages a night. Who knows when I'm going to finish? We're going to finish that. We're not in a hurry. I'm working my way through C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy.
Oh, yes.
So good. At times there's little sermons in there, and at times it's very descriptive. And I just finished Paralandria.
Oh man.
Yeah, and so that's been really good. I haven't read it in 20 years, so it's all new. I feel like I don't remember any of it, and it's been a real treat.
Each one of those books, even though it's a trilogy, I feel like it's its own piece. The first and the second, yeah, they're connected, but the second, with his depiction of the second Eden.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the third, his perspective on mythology and Pendragon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I won't give away any more. Yeah.
Yes,
Read it.
I'm looking forward to the Hideous Strength. And so taking a break from the space trilogy, I just finished Paralandria. So a group of friends were reading through a book right now, and it's called The Anubis Gate. It's like a time traveling thriller, sci-fi, steampunk type thing.
cool.
Again, just a good novel. This kind of falls into my category of it's fun and reading it through with a group of guys, and it's a fun thing to do. So those are the books I'm reading through right now, currently. Some of those I'll finish quicker than others. When and where I read kind of dictates what I'll be reading at that time, if that makes sense. And then in terms of recommendations, this is really hard. There's not like thou should read a specific books. I will give recommendations on reading. How about that? Those I'll be the hard and fast. And then I'll kind of give guidelines on how to look for books you should be reading. So the one I've already referenced it, Tony Reinke's book, Lit, A Christian's Guide to Reading Books. Really good. Very practical, even down to like note-taking within a book. I love Tony Reinke's view on media as a whole. He wrote a book on like technology. He wrote a trilogy of books on technology, one of them being 12 Ways How Your Phone is Changing You. Phenomenal. So good. I'll recommend that one. How about that? There. That one for sure. Also, there's a book called Breaking Bread with the Dead by Alan Jacob. Really good on how we should be engaging with books. He took that from a poet, but I love that title, Breaking Bread with the Dead.
Yeah.
That's just that alone, you should read that book.
Yeah, I'm going to go hang out with some dead guys.
Yeah. Have communion with some dead guys. And then the novel Who Needs It by Joseph Epstein, I've been really enjoying that. I'm only about halfway through, but I would recommend reading that. Now in general, like what I would say, how you work through what to read yourself. One, be curious. Curiosity is almost always the main driving force in all of this. Are you curious about how things work? Are you curious about people? Are you curious about a time, an event, a part in history, whatever it might be? If you're curious about that, pursue that. Find what's good in that field and on that topic, and just often I will come across a topic and it's like, oh, I don't know anything about that. I couldn't tell you two things. So then I just Google the best book on whatever. I've done Irish Troubles. I don't know anything about that. And then let that kind of be your guide as well. The other good indicator of time. Time is the best judge of quality. In time, so many things will just fall away. I don't typically read a lot of new novels, not because they're not good. I don't have the time to read a bunch of bad things to decide what's good. I'd rather let time do that for me. And if it's still relevant, if it's still in print, obviously there are really good novels that are out of print and have been forgotten. But generally, I don't have the time to nor the ability to read all that's coming out that's new. And so you can kind of look back and say, hey, what's stood the test of time, as we say, right? There's a reason we say that, and let that be it. Starting with kind of, if you found at least a couple things you like, what are the influences on that? So even if it could be like, I like Star Wars. I like the Star Wars movies. Well, man, do I have the books for you, right? Like the same author who wrote Tarzan wrote a series called the Mars series, and a lot of what George Lucas took for Star Wars comes from these books, right? John Carter of Mars, the movie is based off these books. And the irony is that a lot of people think that's a ripoff of Star Wars, but it's actually, the movie is faithfully based off the book that Star Wars, that George Lucas took a lot of elements and mixed it into his. So, and then like I mentioned earlier, of like you start with Dante, then you work to Virgil, and then you're at Homer. Like follow those rabbit trails and whatever is interesting you. Like, oh, I really like this, and you're like, oh, but this person influenced this or this or that. And when you find an author, read their other stuff, kind of dig deeper. There was a time dystopian novels were I read 1984 and that blew my mind. Such a good, right? And then it was like, what other dystopian novels are there? And that led me down a whole rabbit trail that way, right? And then I'm reading Utopia by Thomas More, because I was like, well, these are all a ripoff of Thomas More's work originally. And so, and then like what else did like Thomas More write? And then you have things like The Praise of Folly, and you're going down these rabbit holes and just go down them. Again, there's no set curriculum, and just let kind of curiosity, and the beauty of literature of what we've talked about is it's layered, and there's all these references to other things, and kind of follow those down as you will. And then just having a group of readers around you. Most of what I read, I would say the majority, is because I have people in my life that I trust, and they'll recommend a book. And then if they recommend it, I'll read it. That's what I like. That's it. That's going on my list. And then I have a giant stack that I haven't read through yet, and it's taunting me even right now at home. But there's a group, like we've started a book club, me and a handful of guys, and it was just that, because we would talk about like, what are you reading? What am I reading? And me and a couple guys each, at the beginning of the year, we'd get a stack of books, and we're like, all right, I think I'm going to read this. And then it's like, what's in your stack? And we talk about it. And then we came up with this, we call it the book draft. We treat books like they're players in a sports draft, so like the NFL draft. So we'd all bring different books, and we talk about them, why another person who's very busy should read it, and then it all goes into a pile, and then we go round one, round two, and you select one of the books, and then you go read it for the year. We're all reading different stuff, but the great thing is I'm getting all these recommendations from these people I trust, and that is a big part of dictates what I read. So I'm not by myself. It's this community that I'm a part of. So the problem with recommending like, hey, you should read these 5 books or 10 books, start here, is kind of what we talked about, where you're at in life. Maybe going something really heavy is not what's for you right now. And so I might say, hey, you should read this or that. And you're like, but that's just not where you're at. Or you're starting out, and you should start out really fun and light. Or it's like, like what I recommend isn't heavy. You're like, I want to go for big right now. So it's really that I couldn't say thou should read these books.
But you would say thou shalt read.
But I would say thou shalt read. Well put.
And quick quip on the spot, yes or no, audiobooks?
Ooh, I do audiobooks.
Okay.
So I do audiobooks because I drive. I have a very long commute. And it's a great way to redeem the time while I'm driving.
Redeeming the time. I like it. Well, this was AJ Woodsum on The Cutting Edge. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and this spurred you on to some good works and some good reads. Until next time.